Hey Deep Chatters, I'm Leah Morris here with my co-host Jennifer Butler, and this is Deep Chats Podcast, where we have raw discussions about real life. Each week you can expect unfiltered, no BS conversations from the heart about topics that actually might matter to you. We're just a couple of relationship coaches who want to cut through the small talk and dive deeper. So thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. Some really interesting things pop up. Specifically, what we wanted to get into today is the blocks that are popping up around, feeling inspired, being creative, doing things, just things in general feel a little sticky to me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just saying how exhausting it is to do nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Me too. Things have just been feeling, there's some days that feel like walking through quicksand. Sometimes it's a moment by moment thing. I'll feel great. And then an hour later, I'm like, whoa, what just happened? Right. So I think, just figuring out different ways to navigate and feel inspired, but also take care of yourself and give yourself the space to rest and all of that. But really just kind of figuring how to manage it and navigate it so that at least you're like, aware and in choice and not just like forcing things or giving up.
Yeah. Is there something specifically that you feel most blocked in?
No, I think for me, it's more like I get blocked emotionally. And then it's hard for me to be creative. And my work, as you know, really is about creativity. I mean, I think it's what I love most about what we get to do. And so, being able to like write and create different ideas and thoughts and be a voice, it's creative, and I just noticed yesterday, I was like, wow, like I really haven't been writing, like I haven't, because it takes a lot. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I just don't have it. I don't have it to give. So
I mean, I feel that exact same way. But I'm trying to, I think my initial, and I won't speak for you, but I feel like we're getting at the same thing. I feel like our initial reaction to things being still and things not moving is to think that that's a block, because sometimes that stillness can be unsettling for people who are creative and who are doers and who feel most alive when things are flowing out of us and through us. But I'm trying to reframe it as this is also part of that creativity, are these like prolonged moments of nothing. And being able to, I guess, just see that as an abundance of creativity too. This is where I'm like sort of collecting my inspiration. This is where I'm like developing these new thoughts and these, getting the rest I need before like something big comes out of me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, I'm trying to show gratitude for the quote unquote block. Like this is where I rest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think like with anything else, right? Like when we can accept and just surrender to wherever we are at, even if it's uncomfortable or it's like disorienting or kind of makes us feel a little discomfort, right? Because it's not what we're used to. I think when we're able to accept and surrender to that, that is where the power lies, right? Like that's where the learning and the teaching can sort of unfold.
Right. Yeah, it's like the fermentation period.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's like this distinction though, like between those moments when you're surrendering, right? And it's like when you can surrender, how beautiful, right? And exactly what you're saying. But then there's those moments where, you know, whether it's your own or it's the collective, but you're like hitting a block that just is painful, or, you know, just kind of knocks you off your feet. And you try to surrender and just let it be, but that sort of emotion of that block is still there. And so it's like navigating through that, which I think takes a lot of energy as well.
Yeah. So not just sitting in that weight of the block, or not just sitting in that total, I mean, acceptance and surrender always, but not stopping there. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it's like, how do you navigate that, right? Like, so there are moments, I know, like if I speak from experience, there's moments when I'm like, oh, I can't do anything, and I'll just surrender to it, right? And then maybe I'll just go lay down, or maybe I'll go stand out in the sun, and I'll just surrender to that moment. Like, this is where I'm at and I'm okay. And there's that. But then, then there's those moments where I want to be able to create, or I want to be able to do something. And then the emotion of not being able to, right? Like, even if you do go lay down and nap, and then you wake back up and that's still there, that heaviness, that pain, that fear, right? I think there's a lot of fear, like whatever those emotions are, you just can't seem to shake them, right? And so then how do you navigate, right? Like, there's a little bit of sitting in it, right? And absolutely, like, but I think that even in sitting in it, like, maybe there's, you know, ways to navigate it where, again, you can make it part of the growth and the learning.
Totally. So I feel like it's funny that this is our topic for today, because I feel like I've been in that stillness for so long since the COVID-19 thing has hit. I've just stopped. Like, I just don't want to thrash around in the quicksand and just sink deeper and deeper out of like my fear to like get out of this. But today I woke up and I was like, I feel like I don't want to be still anymore. And I think that's the feeling I was waiting for, was like sort of my higher self calling me out and saying like, you've completed this part of the process. Now what? And a big part of me wants to, I think, sit in the stillness longer, because it's like, okay, at least I know that I can do that. But there's something that doesn't align anymore with that for me, and for where I need to be at. And I think my first, and I'm getting to the point of this, but I think my first step in switching gears is changing the cycle of what I've been doing. So for me, whenever I want to like jumpstart anything, or start to navigate through like, okay, I've been still, I've been surrendering, or I've been accepting, now it's time to make a move, I have to like break the routine that I've been doing to start to open up to whatever is meant to inspire me, and to open up to whatever action I need to be taking, and not to just take it all on myself of like, you need to choose, you need to figure it all out now, but just simply like open myself up to might be possible and what might be waiting for me to express. And typically that's like breaking a routine or a cycle that I've been doing so that something new can come through.
So do you mean specifically breaking a routine? So changing like your bedtime, your awake time, what your work hours, let's say, maybe it's your workout routine, like completely switching your cycle.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes for me, I like to change a few things, not like everything, but, like for instance, I really work well when I have a visual prompt. And so even like writing on my mirror or like putting something where I can see like a book by my bed. Like right now I have this book, maybe you've read it. It's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Mm-hmm. And it's all about overcoming creative blocks in order to move forward more deliberately. Uh-huh. It's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. It's a short book, but and I've read it a few times whenever I've been ready to move through things, and it's extremely helpful. But I have that like by my bed now. That sort of breaks up my routine rather than just having my phone right there or something there that's not going to feed that inspiration. Another thing is I, for some reason, always feel the need to like clear things out. So I just kind of like go through my house and get rid of a lot of stuff and clean. And that feeling of spaciousness tends to jumpstart like, okay, now what needs to land here? And it sort of makes room for more things.
You know, it's so interesting because you're talking about like ritual and routine, which oftentimes is a tool to get yourself moving, right? It's like find a ritual, find a routine that will keep you motivated, that will keep you moving, but you're kind of flipping that over. And like really what you're keying into is sometimes our rituals and our routines can actually be the thing that keep us stuck and keep us blocked because we get so just reliant and dependent on it. We don't even have to think anymore, right? So that's so interesting, right? Because you're like totally looking at it from the opposite angle.
Right. I like the way you put that. It's like we don't even have to think anymore. And that is the beauty of routine, is it makes things more predictable. But I think like especially right now when things are really unpredictable, why not challenge our brain to problem solve a little bit more and, you know, see things maybe from a different perspective. I've even gone so far as to like rearrange furniture in my house to like it just fires things off differently in your brain and things start to feel a little bit more like interesting in a way, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that perspective. Totally just lost my train of thought, but no, I love that perspective of flipping that routine around. Because there is a comfort in that. And, you know, I guess I'm thinking of it like even how I've felt about meditating, because meditation has been such a part of like my ritual, my routine for so long, and just how many blocks I've come up against it during this time period. And once I surrendered to that and let it go, it's really been interesting what's been taking its place, because I'm still committed to, you know, what meditation does for me. But there's other ways to access that. And so it's been interesting to see like all the different types of things I feel inspired to do to get to that place, right? You know, different like old yogi, you know, breathing techniques that I haven't done in 15, 20 years. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do that, right? And then just doing that for as long as feels good, and then moving on to something else, right? And just giving myself the space to play in that, I think is important, especially right now with all the monotony and just kind of Groundhog Day experience, I think that a lot of us are having.
Oh my God, that's such a good reference. It is Groundhog Day. Yeah, I feel like with what you just said, like I'm still committed to the practice of meditation, and at least what like the benefits of it. But I feel like I'm hearing from you, but that what you're really committed to is like giving yourself what you need when you need it. And like in that is a meditation.
Right.
Noticing like what's coming up for me in this moment. How do I need to react to that? And then doing it. Like it's not meditation, or not in the traditional sense. It's breathing, you know, or for me, it's been like creating funny videos or picking up my guitar and trying to learn how to play something new.
Yeah.
You know, like that, I think what you're doing is a result of that meditation work that you've practiced all these years, you know, is saying like, I need to put this down. That's what's showing up for me. And I need to pick up something else.
Yeah. And what you're saying, there's something about going into the resistance. Because I think sometimes we like generalize stuff like, oh, we're blocked, right? And we've kind of experienced that on this like high level of intellectually, like what we understand that to be. But not all resistance is the same, right? Like, so if we can, you know, take the time to drop into the resistance, wherever that is in our bodies, and learn specifically like, okay, today, what is my resistance today? Because what it is today might be different from what it was yesterday, might be different from what it is next week. But so where am I right now? Like, what's the resistance? What's the feeling right now? Like maybe right now it's fear, but maybe yesterday it was, you know, just exhaustion, right? Or who knows, right? But really kind of dropping down into that and figuring out what are those feelings of resistance specifically. And then, like you said, what do I need then? Right? Because I think I'm going to need something very different if I'm afraid than if I'm tired, or if I'm feeling, you know, disappointment, or I don't know. Right. But like the need will be very different dependent on what really is the resistance in that moment. Does that make sense?
Totally. And this is another, I feel like we're saying the same thing in like a few different ways, which is cool. Breaking the routine isn't necessarily just to break the routine. It's to give ourselves something that we need, which is different from what we've been needing. You know, and like being still long enough and listening to that resistance long enough to say like, what do you need right now? And then switching up that ritual or routine in accordance to those needs and to what that resistance has shown us. It's an incredible teacher. Feeling blocked, I think, is one of the most underrated things, because I think what it shows us is where we're not in alignment, right? It shows us like, oh, you can't do the things you've been doing, or you can't keep going at this pace, or, you know, you've got to switch things up. Something's off. You know, like that feeling of stuckness or blockedness or stillness even, that's just a redirect. That's just a rerouting to get us to somewhere higher. And of course we're going to feel resistance to that, because you never feel blocked when you're going from a higher sense of yourself to a lower sense of yourself. It's just an easy fall.
Right.
You always feel blocked when you're on the verge of leveling up, I feel. And so of course that resistance is like, ooh, there that is again. And we can almost look at it like, I'm ready to grow. You know, I'm ready for my next level. Or however it is you want to reframe it and look at it. But I think as shitty as it feels, sometimes it's a good indicator that we're evolving.
Yeah, I think what I hear a lot from clients, and I can relate to this too, but the fear of allowing themselves to just be in the resistance, like afraid that if they don't do anything, if they just sit in bed all day because that's all they feel like doing, that they're not going to be able to stop, right? They're not going to be able to like, what if that's forever? Right? Like, when is that moment when I say that's enough? Or does that mean I'm not listening to myself? And, you know, so I think I hear that a lot. Like, well, maybe that's my pattern, right? Maybe that's my story. And that's why I want to sit in bed. Like, how do I know the difference? Right? When it's really benefiting me, or it's just me trying to escape. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good, I think that is something that is pretty common, is trying to figure out, like, if I give into the waking up at noon, sitting in front of the TV every day, like, at what point is that too much?
Yeah.
At what point have I lost myself?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I've honestly, just full transparency, I feel like I've been sitting in a place like that, not necessarily, you know, verbatim, but in a place where I've needed stillness and needed nothingness and not felt creative. It's been like over a month now for me. Possibly even 2 months, where I really won't do anything that I don't feel I need to do. And I haven't pushed myself. I haven't challenged myself. I haven't switched up routine. And part of me started to wonder that question, like, how much is too much? Like, how still is too still? And the challenge I've found, where I needed to grow most, I think, through that experience, was in recognizing just how much I already had and how much like abundance was already surrounding me. Because I think my need to move was coming more from a place of like not thinking it was enough, not thinking that I already had enough.
Right.
And when I do and am inspired, I feel like, okay, like now I'm more, now I'm enough. Now I have, you know, the things that I need in order to be my highest, you know, version of myself. And I think my lesson, and I don't know, maybe somebody needs to hear this, but the stillness was the lesson for me of like, you can literally do nothing for 2 months and still be enough and still have the abundance of waking up every morning and taking deep breaths, and have the abundance of connecting with friends, like for a walk in the park, you know, and still have the abundance of falling asleep at night and knowing that I'm safe. Like, so many tiny minuscule things began to show up as like, you're not blocked at all. You're not stuck at all. You are thriving. This is thriving. And I think once that lesson has now like really solidified for me, like 2 months of that is, I feel like, a really long time. Like, I've never done that before. But I feel like that's the time I needed for that lesson to solidify. And now I'm ready to take that and to do something with it. Right. And so just maybe to like reflect on what you just said, like how much is too much? How much stillness should I be doing right now? I think ask yourself, what's the lesson that needs to be learned? Like, what is this moment trying to show me? And I think that's when we really come into like that presence of like, it doesn't need to look like anything other than what it looks like now, because right now is where the lesson is. And maybe this is too like spiritual or something, but this is making sense.
It's totally making sense. But I think that on some level though, there is a part of you that knows that you can trust yourself, that you'll know when it's time.
Totally.
Right. And so I think that not everybody trusts themselves to know. right? And so it's like, how do they connect with that part of themselves, with that deeper knowing that it's all like, I keep having this image or like this voice in my head of like when people are afraid to start crying because they're afraid once they start crying, they will never, ever, ever, ever stop. Right.
Yeah.
And you just kind of hold it in, sometimes for a lifetime, because it's terrifying. Like the tears will just never stop flowing. Mm-hmm. And so I just get that image when I think about, you know, the fear of just letting yourself go. Right. And if you don't have that center, you know, that sort of deeper knowing within where you can be like, okay, well, I'll know when it's time. I can trust myself to do this. I can see how it's terrifying.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm just on that. I was reading one of my favorite books, about leadership and success. And it's it's called The Essential Wooden. It's about John Wooden. He's a UCLA coach, or was. Anyway, he created this sort of pyramid, which sort of lays foundational blocks of what is needed in order to reach like this peak of greatness, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And at the very top of the peak is greatness. But on the sides of it, like sort of mortar, are faith and patience.
Yeah.
And after, you know, we've built all these blocks and we've done all this work, it's just so interesting to me that at the very top is what I would consider just like, but also like surrender and trust, you know, faith and patience.
Yeah.
And to be able to really like hone those skills of, you know, for me, patience also equates to surrendering and acceptance and just sort of waiting. And the faith is trust, what you're talking about, you know, and being able to say like, you know, at the end of the day, I can cry and I know when it'll be time to stop, and I trust myself. I have faith that, you know, I have faith in my instincts to do whatever I need to do through this process. That's a big, big, big piece. But I don't think we can ever really reach that peak of like self-mastery in a way if we don't have just that humility to say, you know what, I think I can trust this situation and myself and, you know, the higher powers or whatever it is that you believe in. The trust is big.
Yeah. And it always comes down to that question, right? Like even when I think about, you know, the type of coaching that I do, and I'm sure you as well, you know, can that be done without some element of faith? Like, is that a necessity? Some part of you that, whether it's faith in yourself or faith in a higher power or faith in some great force or just whatever it is, faith in nature, like whatever that thing is, that's just a little bit bigger than you on that human level, right? That's a little deeper or more all-knowing or whatever that is. Is that a necessary component then in order to really achieve, whether it's greatness or, you know, whatever sort of that pinnacle is for you?
Yeah. The moving through the blocks even.
Yeah. Or like, right. Like anything, mastering, you know, your own self-love. And I don't know.
How do you harness that trust and faith?
Yeah. So, I mean, and even as I look at the type of coaching I do, I rely heavily on that piece. Mm-hmm. No, it's like almost an assumed component for me. And I think I've even started to think like it almost has to be a conversation had at the very beginning. Like this work relies heavily on a part of you, like do you have access to that part of you, or to something bigger that you relate to other than yourself and others? Like, is there something else that you relate to as well? Because I think at the end of the day, when we talk about trust, it really does start with, can we trust ourselves, right? Because we can't trust others if we can't trust ourselves. Mm. And how do we learn how to trust ourselves? Well, then, yeah, there has to be, I mean, for me, it's like, life's got me, right? Like, for me, it's a constant reminder, like when things are really scary and I'm afraid and I am just like barreled over, right? That part of me that is that deeper knowing, the voice or the wisdom that comes through is like, life's got me. I'm okay. Like, no matter what happens, right? Like, life's got me. Mm-hmm. And I know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I feel like it's almost, you're just feeling like a deep sense of connectedness to everything.
So maybe
else.
That's it. So is it connection?
I feel like connection's a big one for me. Like, when I'm feeling the most afraid is when I'm like separating myself the most. And when I'm saying like, love does not belong to me, or, understanding or intimacy or friendship, like, oh, those aren't my, like, when I envision myself being separate from everything is when I feel like I am the most or the least trusting.
Yeah.
And when I begin to tap back into actually, like, those things are all part of me and I'm part of them, and I'm, feeling extremely at peace and held by everything around me, that's when I feel most trusting, because it's like, how could I fall? I'm part of it. I'm part of all of it. And that just feels really, I guess, relaxing to experience. And I feel like trust is relaxing.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I feel like we're like on this whole other level now of discussion, which is like, maybe that's really what faith or religion is meant to be, is just this ability to have us all connect with each other and understand that we're all a part of oneness. Yeah. And that just got carried away. But really all faith is your ability to really deeply know that you're not alone and that you're connected in some deeper way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we started with how to overcome blocks, and now we're like, wait, nobody's blocked at all, guys. Spoiler alert.
We're all connected. Just tap in to your faith.
Totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that's just a really important piece, though, of this whole conversation of like navigating through blocks, and especially now in this time frame where we're like alone and quiet and maybe butting up against some of our fears and insecurities and lack of faith. And maybe that now is a really good time in the resistance to really just get curious about, how much do I trust in life? How much do I trust in myself? Where can I grow in faith? What does faith mean to me? A lot of us have post-trauma from religion, right? And we kind of like put faith and religion in one bucket. And maybe it's just getting curious about what that means for you and separating that out, and what can you have faith in?
I love that. I just wrote down as you were talking, resistance equals lack of faith.
Yeah.
Or at least it feels like that. And I think, asking ourselves those questions of, how can I strengthen that trust? What do I need to be reminded of. For me, it's what, the abundance that surrounds me. That's always a good reminder that I can trust.
Yeah.
That always gets me back to connection. But yeah, even questions like, how am I separating myself from what already is here in front of me? How am I not noticing all the ways that I'm unblocked already?
Yeah.
And that sort of creates like this, snowball effect in a way. Oh, in fact, that door isn't closed and that window isn't closed and there's no blocks anywhere. There's no walls. Like, you just start to notice more that you're not blocked at all.
Yeah.
I think that's a big first step too, is that, yeah, breaking routine, like we said, and maybe like creating new challenges for our brain to start to like stretch and expand, but also noticing where you need to have more trust, more faith, noticing where you can be more at peace and relaxed, and how, how unblocked you are too. It's not in all areas that we're blocked ever.
Right. But it's like we get blocked in one area and then we're like, suddenly we believe our whole lives is, we're completely blocked. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, something you said too about, just appreciation and seeing where you're not, just what you do have, where you are abundant. And it's like, you get more of what you appreciate. Right. And it's so if you can, just see where you can appreciate what you do have, and just see what that opens up.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, flow and creativity and abundance, those are all like synonymous words, but I feel like those aren't things that you necessarily manifest or do. They're just things that you are present to. And I think if you can maybe reframe it in that way, all the blocks are lifted. If I'm simply present to flow, and I'm present to creativity, and I'm present to be inspired and to feel my abundance, in that way, it's just like complete connectedness and oneness with all of that.
Yeah, it's almost like if you do that, then like, what if the block is actually us as human beings trying to control the how?
Like the ego is the block.
Well, like, for example, for me, like writing, right? Like and to me, that's my creativity, right? And it's like, I love to write because it like gets my creative juices flowing. And right now I haven't been wanting to write. And so for me, it's like I'm creatively blocked. But what if the writing is actually me just controlling the how? And if I can just surrender to it, creativity might look like something very different for me right now. Right. But if I can focus on, well, my source of creativity is writing. And if I keep my focus there, I'm not going to be able to give way to the whatever other possibilities there are for creativity right now.
Totally. You're almost like seeing yourself in a different way as like, oh, I'm just the messenger.
Right. Like, what wants to
right now,
come alive?
Writing. Yeah. Right now I need to be doing something else. I'm just gonna connect to that.
Right. And see what comes. Yeah. Like, I even think about poetry, right? Like, the only time I've ever been able to write poetry in my life is when I've been in excruciating emotional pain, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, otherwise I couldn't write a poem to save my life. But when I was going through my divorce 10 years ago, that's all I did was write poetry, right? Because like my heart was so, and I just kind of gave way to that, and I just let it flow. I couldn't write a poem now, right? Like I said, if you pay me. So it's like, yeah, it's just kind of taking our hands off the wheel and being like, okay, like, how am I supposed to be used, or what's supposed to come through me right now?
Totally. I love that the humility and how that sounds too.
Yeah.
It just sounds so, it sounds so trusting, you know, and it sounds so like, yeah, humble. I just love that. I think it's great.
Yeah. So, I hope that helped anyone who's kind of been coming up against some blocks and feeling a little bit stuck and icky throughout these last couple months. I guess what we would love is if you have anything to add to the conversation, right? Like any ways that you manage feeling stuck or feeling that resistance, any tools or ways that you sort of reframe it or experience it in your body. We would love to hear it. So please share with us and let us know like what we spoke about spoke to you. So I think that's all for us today, Deep Chatters. As always, we are grateful and honored to be here with you, and we will see you next week. I think we have a guest next week, so we're excited to share him, our first man guest on Deep Chats with you. So have a beautiful day, everybody.
To all you Deep Chatters out there, Leah and I want to thank you so much for listening. This is a podcast that's all about connection, so we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram at Deep Chats Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes to rate and review us. Every review helps other Deep Chatters just like you be able to find this podcast.